My mum made me do it. She forced me to play the piano. And I'd be really annoyed because my friends were outside playing on their bikes, but my mum was like, no, you've got to practice. And it felt like I was practicing for hours. I was probably only doing 10 minutes, but it felt like for hours. I essentially practiced the piano every single day and started out by playing these exercises called Hanon. I found them quite boring, but they were quite difficult, some of them. This was from a very, very early age. It was one of my first experiences. Sometimes I would not remember that I had played. It was almost like I would wake up and I'd finished it. This started happening quite regularly. On the occasions that happened, my mum would often say, wow, that was the best that you've done that. You did that flawlessly. There were no mistakes. I was like, this is strange. And then this started to happen a little bit when I was playing pieces as well. It was like I would lose myself. I wouldn't be there. I wasn't thinking, I was just doing the thing. It was like time had no meaning and I came around and then I kind of entered the picture again and I'd finished. Mum was like, that was great. Whereas the times when I was trying to play the right notes and I was like, it just didn't work. I kept on making mistakes. I would get frustrated. From this situation, very early on in my life, I didn't phrase it like this, obviously, because I was very young. I mean, what I didn't realize I was realizing, I guess, was that consciously trying hard wasn't necessarily when I did my best. And what I didn't know back then was that what I was experiencing was what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi has called flow, a problem that's very persistent in our culture and in the way that we teach people and the way that we think we need to learn. I believe it massively overemphasizes the role of conscious thinking. Conscious thought is an absolutely essential skill that makes us human. It allows us to envision possible futures and connect it with our past experiences and think about things that don't exist, analyze things and pull things apart with our mind. It's crucial. It's a wonderful thing. But conscious thinking at the same time has huge limitations. It's a very slow process compared to an intuitive one. You can only hold very small amounts of information in your conscious mind at one time. When you're talking about doing something like playing or producing or making, putting everything through your conscious mind is like trying to put everything through this very tiny hole. When you've got this much wider, broader hole that you can create things through, which is your unconscious, intuitive way. I do think that we limit ourselves by thinking that we have to consciously think through everything as we're doing it. If you freeze up when you're trying to do something and you know that you can do it, it's going to be overthinking. You're putting your conscious thought at the center of your creative process. And so those early experiences have, in the end, over the last 50 years or so, turned into this model. So instead of it just being about conscious thought, this is the way that we make things at Make Music Your Life. Conscious thinking is an essential part of the creative process. But most people who struggle in the creative process, I've noticed that it's because they think that the creative process is consciously deciding to do something and then consciously doing it, and then that thing having to be the thing that comes out. Where if you ever say, I'm just getting in my own way, or I'm overthinking, or I'm second guessing myself, that's what you're doing. And the problem is with most training out there is that it requires that you do more thinking first in order to be able to do the thing. Yeah, it's learn, put this information into your head, and then apply it. And the problem with that is that most people, and I do think it's most people, never get beyond that. So what I do here is I start with this model in mind, with conscious thinking as a part of the process. A much broader thing is our unconscious, what happens in our unconscious. And out of the kind of interplay of those two things, stuff emerges. There's the emergent noticing, oh, hang on, there are patterns going on here. It's a holistic way of making music. So it's bringing in the whole picture. And so I start with that model in mind. So what we do at Make Music Your Life is do to learn first. This is expressed in the music machine system. So many of the principles of a session and how the music machine works are starting with this understanding about how we make and with ideas of flow in mind. We've got direct listening, where we are listening to the sound coming out of the speakers before making notes about the sound coming out of the speakers. We're attempting to step back from our critical thoughts about the music first. I mean, we're using the critical thoughts. I'll come to that, right? But we're just listening to the sound. We're experiencing the music as it is before bringing our absolutely essential critical mind to bear, which is what we do after listening. And bear in mind, we're doing the thinking outside of the process. We're not assuming that we can make all of these decisions in the process. So outside the process, we're listening, we're analyzing, we are thinking, we're using that absolutely essential skill of, okay, here's what I could do. Here are the problems. Here's what's missing. These are the emotions I want to express. So it's like, most people have got this the wrong way around. They want to think inside the process and intuit outside of the process. And they complain, that, I just really want to focus on quality. And then they complain when I ask them to think about their music outside of the process. That's when you want to focus on quality, is outside of the process, when you're listening, because that's when you are the most, not completely, but most objective. Inside of the process, we just do. And in order to help you do that, we use timers. And I encourage you to use timers because, again, it snaps you into this doing rather than thinking. If you've got unlimited amounts of time, maybe I could do that. Oh, actually, I'm going to plug in my leads. When you've got loads of time, that's what tends to happen. So we encourage you to work much more quickly and do shorter sessions because it de-emphasizes the conscious mind in the actual moment of making the music at the sharp end, when you're in the trenches. And how many more metaphors can I come up with? That doesn't mean we're not allowed to do longer sessions, because over time you train yourself to notice when you're inappropriately using conscious thinking in the process. But at first, if you've overthought your way through the creative process and you've struggled as a result, doing short sessions and using the limitation of time is a way to train yourself out of that. And obviously, the big one is splurging, the splurge mindset, which initially I train people at the start of the process because it's easiest to do then, because there's just no, it doesn't matter. So we get people to do a load of splurges at the start of the process because it's actually easiest to train your zero focus on quality. Splurging is not focusing on quality, it's going as fast as you can, which allows you to not focus on quality, making a maximum number of ideas, which obviously is partially about getting those ideas, getting the good ideas out of the 100. You're making a massive number of ideas, so you're going to get some good ones, right? Rolling the dice type thing. But it's also crucially about training your ability to notice those quality judgments. Because you know what a quality judgment is? A quality judgment is a thought. It is thinking. If I say to you, do not focus on quality, what I'm actually doing is getting you to become aware of those quality judgments. That's one of the most essential aspects of splurging. But even though splurging is a way of starting the process, it is also the mindset, the approach we can take in all of our sessions. When you're doing discovery sessions, of course, because that's the start of the process. When you're doing drafting sessions, when you're arranging things and telling the story, and even when you're doing the release prep sessions, when you are mixing, when you're improving the production, you can still take the splurge mindset because, again, we're thinking outside of the process and we are doing inside the process. So it's absolutely essential, even when you're finishing your music, to just notice that when you are thinking in the process, take a step back and go, I'm just going to do. I can think later. I can analyze. I can plan outside the process. If you are a solo artist, a solo producer, composer, songwriter, you don't have the luxury of a third person perspective. So you need to be that third person perspective by separating it in time. Simply do when you're making music, do the thinking when you're not making music.